welcome back to Making Everyday Magic. My name is Shanna. If you are new here, we are a homeschooling family of 4 who focuses on secular curriculum choices, and we have just finished our 5th year of homeschooling. Today, I am so excited, so excited. We have a guest star. Today, I am getting a crazy, unique opportunity to interview David from History for the Ages. I am so excited. I'm so excited. Guys, before we go any further, please scroll down, hit the big red subscribe button, turn on the bell for notifications, and give this video a thumbs up. While you are at it, go down there, find the link to David's channel, History for the Ages, and go subscribe there as well. This is such a unique perspective. David is a college history professor turned accidental homeschool resource. He started cheering for his own classes when things went virtual, and it just kind of started growing, especially in the homeschool community. So he reached out, and today we are doing an interview. Let me apologize now because you guys know I'm not like super tech savvy, but I'm gonna try to do like the side-by-side Zoom record. So also, can we please, like, total sidebar and unrelated, let's talk about imposter syndrome, because Guys, I have no training in this. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm super excited to talk with David and share with you. I have a list of things and questions, and I am so excited. I'm like pretty stoked to have this opportunity. I think it's kind of a huge thing to be able to genuinely pick the brain of somebody who, is in the profession of things that we all aspire to, right? Like, we aspire to have our kids be college students if that's the path for them. And so getting feedback on that, and as a secular community, I am so excited, and I feel like it's kind of huge. So I'm really excited. Stay tuned. Do not forget, go over and subscribe to David right now. He's awesome. He's amazing. I'm hoping that we can get him getting in some interactions here on the chat. So I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I know you're excited. Guys, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. Okay, and we will both excuse any children who show up, right?
Yeah, actually, mine's at the grandparents right now, so we're good.
Nice. Mine are entertained upstairs, so fingers crossed.
No problem.
Okay, so
All right.
So David, thank you for coming. Can you tell us just a little bio about yourself?
Sure. So I've been teaching history now for 25 years at a community college. I love it. I tell my students the first day I haven't worked a day in my life. I get when I was 18 years old, I went to my history professor. I went to community college. I really love this stuff. I want to teach history at a community college. And, I've been doing that. So I absolutely love it. I was actually born in Israel and, moved here. So I'm an immigrant, and, came here, learned English as a second language. And, my parents have an amazing life story, being refugees at one point, and they all made the American dream happen. And so I'm like a really big believer that there's always opportunities to do well, and I always encourage my students to have that idea that I tell my students the first day, you can't control what happens in your life, only how you react to the things that happen, and how to get them through things. So I love teaching, I love history, and I'm been very excited to get involved in the whole homeschool community. It's just been amazing.
That's really great. That's really great. Just a little bit about myself. We just, I don't know, it seemed like the right answer for us. So we just finished our 5th year of homeschooling. There's a lot of people, as you know, as the world has changed in the last few years, who came to it kind of out of a weird place of necessity. We weren't those people. We bought into all this long before that.
Yeah.
So we just, keep trucking. Something that my channel specifically, and we choose as parents for our own children, is to focus on a secular based curriculum, which I don't know if you're familiar with the homeschool world, but secular history is kind of big deals here. Like, it's hard to find. There's few resources. I mean, it's just not spoken about a lot.
So, it's interesting when you talk about secular history, not secular history. My approach is, first of all, you can't separate religion from history.
Agreed.
Right. Yeah. So when I'm lecturing on Western civilization and I talk about the rise of Judaism or Christianity or Islam, you just give the story, the narrative, King David, King Solomon, Solomon's temple, but you do it from, archaeological, for example. Is there evidence to support these ideas? And if there is, there is. But I also teach students a lot of times, there's elements of faith in religion. And it's not my job to tell people this is right or this is wrong. It's faith. And people believe what they would believe. So, for example, when you lecture on Islam, there are narrative facts. Muhammad was born in Mecca, moved to Medina. Did he receive the verses of the Quran from that's your faith. You either believe it or you don't, right? And that's kind of my approach on it. And I also think secular doesn't mean anti-religious,
I
right?
totally agree with that. I
Right.
completely agree with
It's
that.
not. And very often I think too many times people think, oh, religion and science, they butt heads all the time. And I don't even think that's true. Just the other day, I was lecturing on the scientific revolution. And I'm like, well, you could believe in the Big Bang Theory and be a religious person because you argue, this is how God created everything. Or, you talk about, do you need a leap of faith to believe in a creator? And I'm like, yeah, you need a leap of faith to believe in a creator. Do you need a leap of faith to believe all of this is one big accident and all the things that needed to happen for human beings to live? And yeah, you do need that too. So I don't think the two necessarily have to butt heads as much, but you have to give an honest narrative. And if somebody wants to say, well, you know, that's something that is a matter of faith. God created everything in 6 days, and you want to believe it's literally 6 days, right? 24 hour, 6 day period. I'm sorry, that's a problem. But you can also argue that, okay, 6 days, how long is a day for God? As long as he wants it to be.
Absolutely.
So if people I'm kind of surprised to say that it's hard to find that type of history because I mean to me it's just this is what you teach, but it's interesting that you're telling me that. So why do you think that is? That do they teach that it's six
So
days and literally 6 days?
there's a lot. Both history and science are kind of the big sticklers when it comes to a secular approach. And I would say that I am probably genuinely just inside the area of being secular. We do have personal faith, and I am not so extreme that I avoid any mention of reference or any mention of God or anything like that. Because again, same with you. I don't believe that's possible, right? Like it's been here for a long time. So it definitely applies to all these things. But whereas history and science are hard to teach from a secular perspective, there's so many homeschool companies, publishers that came out of people wanting their children to be homeschooled for religious reasons because public schools being too liberal or too indoctrinating, which tends,
Which is true.
and it's coming up again now in everyday news. So there
I
are
live
a
in
lot.
California, trust me, I know.
There's a lot. Well, I'm in the Bible Belt, so it's like
Right.
both sides of that. But there's a lot of stuff that is, science where it basically says, God created the earth in 6 days, and we just don't talk about anything else. But it's
Yeah.
science. Like there's evidence to support, like you said, kind of a different view of that. And same thing with history, where there are some curriculums that will take a tone that is maybe pro-Christian and not necessarily even neutral, or is
Right.
maybe unfavorable to Islam or Judaism. And so it's hard to find
Yeah.
some of
You
that.
have to be honest about things. Look, when you talk about Christianity, you can't ignore, Protestant Reformation and the killings that were done. But you also can talk about all the wonderful things that have come out of Christianity and in Judaism. Think of the ideas of Judaism. Do they influence our secular society today? Yes, all you have to do is walk in the Supreme Court. You see the Ten Commandments there, our Judeo-Christian value system. And so I don't think they need to butt heads as much as they do. Is one of my reactions to it.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift just a little bit on
Sure.
this kind of same vein, talking about curriculums and things like that. What, better yet, how do you feel about exposing young children to history? Because it's
Oh.
it's not taught much in the early grades of elementary. So
Sure,
how do you feel?
And maybe seen some of my videos. My little daughter, she's 4, and we do
She's
these little,
adorable. Absolutely
yeah,
adorable.
and she's only 3 or 4, but I work with her, and she, where was Napoleon born? She goes, Corsica, and so you could teach them that. It all has to be age appropriate. I think that's a big part of maybe why it's hard to teach history for younger kids is, I'm not going to get into things like the Holocaust with my 5, 6 year old. It's not, they're not ready for that yet.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
And, but you can still make it fun. You could still make stories. You could still, teach about, oh, this is an amazing palace, or this is a cool person, or this is a cool place. And I think you can make it in that perspective when they're younger. And as they get older, then you get into, the real history and the real details. And, I never understood people say, oh, history is boring. I mean, you're talking about the most dramatic event. Look at our last 2 years, right? And everything that's gone on in our nation in our last 2 years. And I'm like, guys, this is like, take COVID, and then you take the bubonic plague and the Black Death of 1347. That was exponentially more damaging to society. And look how much this has impacted us. Imagine how dramatic that event was. So I think if you can kind of connect it and say, hey, these are the most dramatic people and events, it's fun, it's interesting. And so I do think you could do that even at a younger age. It's just you have to make it age appropriate.
I agree with that. And I think especially with where young kids are concerned, it's important to let them know that, it's very simple, the idea of good and bad, right?
Right.
But I think it's important for kids to help them understand a little bit, like there's never been anybody who was all good and never anybody who was all bad, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
there's shades. And there was I don't remember what we were reading. I think it was like a graphic novel about World War II. And
Mhm.
it didn't get into a lot of things, but it did reference Hitler. And so just trying to explain that to young kids, it's like the closest thing I could relate it to. I was like, he was Voldemort. Like if you can just most closely align the kind of the ideas and the feelings
Yeah.
that come with that. Like
How
he
old
had
were
a
you,
lot
you
of,
said?
my oldest is
Yeah.
now 10, and then my youngest is going to be 6.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that it's hard to get into people like Hitler at that age. But
Yes. But I
yeah,
think it's important for children's growth to kind of, from an early age, kind of hint that there is no black and white, right? Like it's
well,
all shades of gray.
well, there is in there. I Okay, to a degree, I agree with that. That you take a lot of people, but there's also at times, like World War II. There's black and white there. There was good and evil. There's
Absolutely. Absolutely.
no doubt about that, right? But then you take, our founding fathers, a lot of discussion, Jefferson and Washington and Lincoln, and people wanting to take down their sculptures and all of that. And that I kind of have a problem with. My whole thing is you don't erase the history, you teach it, the good, the bad, and you make sure you judge people of their time by their standards, not by our standards. Because if you
Yes.
still do that, then we'll never have a sculpture up of anybody because you're always going to have somebody in the future that doesn't, our values are wrong.
Right.
So you just teach everything. It's like the same issue with religion, and you teach to have slaves. You teach the issue of slavery. You don't just ignore it. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of gray in history. But I do think, I was interviewing a testimonial of one Holocaust survivor that I know really well. I have a lot of lectures about them, and he's like, can anybody be redeemed? And he talked about there are some people who can't. There are actually people, he said, like a person like Hitler, a person like Stalin, those individuals, they're not redeemable people. But he, living through the Holocaust, he even said, yeah, there are people who even did horrible things during the Holocaust can be redeemed. But he said some people can't.
I totally,
Yeah.
absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
How has your opinion on history changed since you've become a parent?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's changed too much. It's just a lot of fun. I want to I've always enjoyed it. And I think, as a parent, I will say there's an extra element of gravity to it to me, especially, being Jewish, knowing what happened, having that family, and knowing that it's so important for students, my future students, to that because it's in part, my child's life is at stake. It's everybody's. And I think it's more connected that it's generational now, and I want future generations to learn it, including my own children, because I have another one on the way. So yeah, I think in that sense.
Okay, so as somebody who is, a master of history, a professor of history, and being part of a minority group with being Jewish, do you feel like there are certain resources maybe that you would recommend to my audience or to homeschoolers where that's a good resource coming from from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Jewish minority, not so much, but in terms of just a history professor, I mean, I think there's a lot of good resources to learn history, different ages, different places. Two things that I really, really think are very valuable: primary sources. And one thing I can send you, I'll send you a link if you want to include, is Fordham University has an amazing web source, which they take all these, they're all free web primary sources, and they
We
have
love
everything
that.
from
We love
the
that.
ancient world to the modern times. It's incredibly well organized. And you want to learn about World War One poetry? Well, you click on modern, you click on World War One, you see the poetry, and you can learn about Wilfred Owen, you can learn about all these people, and you see the primary source. So that's one. It's just anytime. Now, you always have to be careful with primary sources because primary sources have their biases, and you have to
Sure.
learn for that. And if you're reading a source by, I don't know if you know a man, Charlemagne, who's this great leader of Europe in the 800s, there's a man named Einhard wrote a whole biography. He describes him as an amazing man, but he was his best friend. So you got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. So you learn that. The other thing that I think is an amazing resource is novels. A lot of times, students, especially teens, like, I don't like history. Okay, go read a novel, right? A historical novel. I like these, actually just did a little short video on my 5 favorite novels that are related to history. And it's like, read A Thousand Splendid Suns. And it's the story of 2 women going through Afghanistan from the time of the Soviets all the way to the Taliban. It's a fictional story, right? They're not 2 real people, but it gives the history. And then I've had so many students read that, and then now I'm excited to learn about the actual history. So I think novels are a great way, a great resource to expose younger people to history.
I love that you
You,
talk
you
about,
mentioned, I think you mentioned graphic novels you use.
yes, yes.
That's great. I think that's wonderful.
They're
Which
so
ones do
fun.
you like to use with your kids?
So we got several, and they are like, there's several. It's like graphic novels based on, like World War One or World War Two. And we have another one that is like 24, I think it's like 24 hours in history. So it's like the day that MLK was assassinated or the day
Oh,
that JFK was assassinated, but it's in graphic novel format. So it looks like a cartoon. So my
yeah,
kids want to read it, and they're entertained by that, which I think is, you just mentioned that you got your students entertained, like you entertained them about it, and it
yeah,
sparked that switch. You flipped
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So transitioning that into, you've become a homeschool resource just by just sharing your normal everyday job.
Yeah,
So
so that's the whole story of that is funny. So the way this all started was, all right, so I've been teaching there at Cypress College for over 20 years. We hold a Holocaust memorial event every year. We bring survivors. And it was about 6 years ago, a lady comes in with her homeschool learning center. High school, she has a homeschool learning center. So there, it's a high school setting. All the parents send them there. And she brings like 100 kids with her.
wow.
And we're like, cool. And then I give my opening speech and she hears it. And then I get an email from her. She goes, Professor Halahmy, I really like what you talk. Can you come in and do a guest lecture for us? I'm like, sure. So I come in, and this is high school. So I go into this high school, homeschool, there's about 50, 60 kids in her class. And I'm doing a lecture on World War II. And I have my interaction with them. And these are 15, 16-year-old kids. And I'm like, they are brighter, more organized, more socially adjusted than my college kids. And I'm like, these guys are great. I mean, I'm loving this. And so it started with that. And then the way it became more for my YouTube is, 2 years ago when everything went to COVID, I'd never taught online. I love being in the classroom. And then they said, no, you got to teach online. I'm like, okay. So I recorded all my lectures, put them up on YouTube. And then I started noticing students, other people other than my students were watching them. And then I started to kind of share them. I found this one homeschool group on Facebook, and I said, I'll share it, free resource. And I'm like, boom, it started to get really big. I'm like, wow, this is cool. So it just kind of happened that way. It was all because of first just being exposed to the homeschool community, and then, being forced basically to do this online, and then put in all my lectures. And I'm like, well, this is kind of fun. And so I'm just having fun with it. And it's just, it's more of a hobby. I have to do them anyways for my lectures for my students. And then I'm like, well, okay, now I could do like extra lectures that aren't for my students, but people would just enjoy. And so I'm just having a lot of fun with
I know we've used some of your videos. We just studied Roman numerals, and I have to tell you,
it.
My public school education did not prepare me for that.
That's a funny one. Yeah, that's one. It's amazing. It's like all these years later, it's like people don't know Roman numerals. So it's a little short. And so it's like things like that. And one of the things I love if your viewers do find my channel is leave comments on my videos because then I know this is a good one. This is what you want to learn. And that's always something that I'm sure you feel the same. All the
Oh,
feedback you
absolutely.
get is very helpful.
I can tell you, if I can find somebody else talking about it, that helps me, one, not have to know that
Mhm.
much. And then two, my kids tend to listen a little differently, right? Like if it's not mom, like, look at
Right.
that. Look, he's
Yeah.
on the TV. He means business. So that helps me out a ton. You came to YouTube definitely at the right time because that's actually when I started this channel was right when all the craziness started
Mhm.
and then homeschool really exploded
Right.
and everybody's looking for these resources to find more information about how to do it and what to do it.
Right.
So that was really good timing on both our parts. Good job.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
Okay.
love how I mean, I've seen a lot of your videos, and it's even though I don't technically we don't homeschool yet. My daughter's only 4, so I guess we kind of homeschool. I mean, learning is so great because it's like my wife will get a milkweed plant outside. We'll plant milkweed plant, and she'll take the caterpillar into the house and the egg into the house, and my 4-year-old, and it's something my wife and child do, and they learn. That's learning. That's
But
great.
that's life cycle and
It
that's science
is,
and that counts.
absolutely, and even at the
Absolutely
age of
counts.
4, you're doing it. I mean, it's all good, and, all the little projects and all of that, those are all part of learning too. So, it's even if you don't homeschool, I think there's a lot of things you can learn from your channel and other things of resources you could use, even if you're putting your kid in public school, that are
Absolutely.
just amazing resources. And that's one of the things I've picked up on. Even I'm all these homeschool groups now. I'm like, oh, okay, I may not homeschool, but I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use that.
Absolutely. Well, it's one of those things I know it kind of naturally fit our lives. I think my husband and I are both kind of a lifelong student. Like you find something
Yeah,
out, you want to know more. And
yeah,
so we always took that approach with our kids. So it kind of naturally made its way into homeschooling.
sure.
I don't know. I know for certainly my husband never thought that this would be a way of life. He wasn't fully on board, but the older she got, the more it just seemed like the natural step.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard. It's got to be hard work to do, and but
We've
again,
never
I
done.
will tell you, and this is something I do want to say, especially to all your viewers, is after teaching for this long, I've had, I think the first time I had a student tell me, "Oh, I was homeschooled," was probably like 15 years ago, and they were a great student. And I tell this to everybody: if you're worried about homeschool and how they'll do in college, every one of my students who I've known has been homeschooled has been one of my top students.
That's fantastic. That's
They
fantastic to
and
hear.
not just in terms of knowledge, like I said, they're well adjusted, they're polite. Oh my God, they're so polite. They're this is the big one. They really enjoy learning.
Yes.
They
Yes.
love the learning. Yeah, I tell my students the first day you go to college to get a degree or earn an education. Anyone can get a degree. I've never been impressed by a degree in my life, right? It's because somebody has a bachelor's, master's, or PhD doesn't mean they have any common sense, wisdom, or ethics. And education, that stays with you forever. And I really find that the homeschool community, the students that come in, they love learning.
Guys, I hope that you found any of that helpful, entertaining, or informative. If you did, please scroll down, hit that big red subscribe button, both here and over on David's channel. I'm gonna link it right there. Be sure to subscribe, help him out, let him know that the content that he is providing that you find incredibly valuable, because I know that I do. True confession, I've already used some of his videos in supplements to what we're already teaching. So guys, I'm so excited. I really hope that you guys appreciate this. I'm excited. I don't know, it feels a little surreal. So I don't know. Thanks for coming back, guys. I hope that you found that really helpful. Go give David some love. As always, you can find me down in the comments or over on Instagram at Making Everyday Magic. Let me know if you want to see more of this kind of stuff. We can either have David back or start sourcing maybe some other perspectives that we don't get enough input from. But anyways, I hope that you loved it, guys.